WWRR, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, WMMZ, Berwick, Bloomsburg, Hazleton, WYCK, Plains. Powered by Mohegan Sun Pocono. It's the New River, 105 and 103.5.
This is Music on the Menu on the River.
Timothy, where on earth did you go?
Featuring Northeast PA's best artists.
Maybe, never mind. She can move me like the stereo, like a song on the radio. She's an angel in the morning, yeah, that's me.
And now, here's your host, Alan K. Stout.
So I got that going for me, which is nice.
All right, everybody. Happy Sunday night. Welcome to Music on the Menu on the River. Alan K. Stout. This is always am. Sunday nights, 9 to 10 o'clock. Bringing you regional artists doing their own original material from right here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Hanging out with D.C. Taylor. D.C., good to see you, my friend.
You too, Alan. How are you?
Good. You staying cool?
Yeah. Nice air-conditioned studio.
A little hot out there this
I'll
week.
stay here as long as I need to.
Here in northeastern Pennsylvania. I don't know what it's like down in Nashville, Tennessee, weather-wise right now, but I think the gentleman on the phone right now calling from Nashville might be able to tell us. We have a very special guest here on the show tonight, Jimmy Harnen, calling from Nashville. Jimmy, welcome to Music on the Menu.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks, DC. It's great to be on the show.
Thanks, Jimmy.
We appreciate you being here. First of all, thank you for being here again, and congratulations, Jimmy, a native of Plymouth, Wyoming Valley West graduate, successful recording artist at one time in his life, recently promoted to president and CEO of BMLG Records, Nashville, one of the biggest record labels in the music industry. Jimmy, congratulations, really.
Thank you, Alan. Don't forget, you can't leave out Wilkes University, because I graduated there, and I don't want any of my professors to get mad at me.
Absolutely not. Wilkes University and Valley West. So he's a Spartan and a Colonel.
There you go.
Literally. Let's talk, Jimmy. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I mean, Jimmy's pretty much a household name here in northeastern Pennsylvania. But, like I said, native of Plymouth, grew up here in northeastern Pennsylvania, went to school here. In 1985, during the summer of 85, Jimmy had a regional hit with a song called Where Are You Now, which got a lot of regional airplay. And then 4 years later, it became a national hit, became the highest charting hit from any artist ever to come from this region, went all the way into the top 10. In around 96, because I was looking through some old interviews that I did with you, Jimmy, recently. Around 96, You moved to Nashville, originally to go down there to take another shot at your music, if I recall.
Correct.
But then you start working for a magazine and networking with the labels and worked your way up to where you are today, which we're going to talk a lot more about during the show. So it's been about a 23-year journey from northeastern Pennsylvania to the position that you now have with the label. But let's start the show going back to that summer of 85, because, I remember hearing the song on the radio. I remember, hearing, I played in a band with some of the same guys that you played in bands with back then from Valley West. I replaced Tom Owens in a band that he was in your band. He actually wrote some songs with you, if I recall.
Yeah, he did. Tommy was a songwriter, and he started out as one of our road crew, and then one day he came in and he said, I've got some songs I want you to hear, and I was like, oh, great. And he played them, and they were awesome. So when I made my record in '89, Jerry Greenberg, who ran WTG CBS, he said, "Who have you been writing with?" And I said, "Tommy Owens and P.J. Williams, who has passed away since then." And he said, "Well, bring him out." So we brought him out, and we had a great time in Los Angeles. And we wrote the opening track on the record. We wrote "Hello." Altogether, I think we wrote like 4 or 5 songs that made that album.
When you wrote "Where Are You Now" in '85, Jimmy, originally, and released it to radio.
Yeah.
Were you expecting it to happen what happened? Because that song, before it became a national hit, that was on the radio here all the time that summer. I mean,
It was.
It was a big hit.
Yeah, thank you. Wilkes University, was Wilkes College back then, was right across the street from where WKRZ was. So I called Jeff Walker, and I said, hey, would you listen to a song? So I brought 2 songs. It was Where Are You Now, and then the B-side was End the Game. And I took it over to him, and he heard the first one, End the Game. He goes, that's really good. And then I played Where Are You Now. He goes, did you guys write this? And I said, yeah, Rich Congdon and I wrote it. And he goes, this is awesome. I'm a little foggy on how we went back over there, but actually, I remember I was driving home from the studio, which we recorded at Susquehanna Sound in Northumberland, and I heard on the radio that KRZ was bringing Bon Jovi to town. And so I called Jeff Walker back up, and I said, hey, my band would like to open up for Bon Jovi. And he goes, well, bring your music over, and we'll play for Al Brock, who's the program director, and Hank Kestenbaum, who's the general manager at the time. So we brought it over, and Al heard it. Al is now in Nashville working in an independent promotion firm, so we see each other all the time. And he said, listen, he goes, you got the job. You can open up for Bon Jovi. He goes, but we want to play the record. And I said, well, and I only had a reel-to-reel tape. And he said, well, I need a reel-to-reel copy of it. And I said, well, how do you do that? So I learned how to get it, how to get it mastered. And I went to, I think we went to, where do we go? Master Disc. I can't remember where we were. Master Disc, probably in New York. Bob Sterling did it. That's right.
Well, that's a well-known name in the mastering. Everybody's heard of him.
Absolutely. So we mastered it. We gave them a master reel-to-reel because CDs back at that time were outrageously priced for an independent artist. And they put it on the radio. And then let me back up. We went to New York and mixed it. Bill Kelly and Jerry Ludzik and Rick Manwiller, we went to the record plant, and we remixed the one that we did as Susquehanna Sound. And then we got it mastered. It's Sterling Sound. That's what it was, Sterling Sound. And then we gave it to KRZ, and they started playing it. And about 3 weeks later, Joe Nardone from Gallery Sound called, and he says, I'd like to take some of your records and put them in the store. And I said, well, how do you do that? And so we went to WIA in Oliphant, and Lenny Mahalik was the gentleman there who helped us out so much, and we made 1,045. And I get a call a week later, and Joe says, we're all out of them. I want to get 5,000 more.
Wow.
And we're like, oh, and back in the day, we didn't have a backer in the very beginning, and so we kept making them, but they were on consignment, so you didn't get paid till they sold. And there was no sound scan back then, so I think we sold, just from looking at some numbers, I think we sold about 15,000 singles. And it was, KRZ blew it up. We played in front of Bon Jovi. It was a great time. Q102 had it number one, I think, for Q102 for like 22 weeks. And then it finished like the number 2 song of the year behind Survivor.
15,000 singles, did you say were sold?
Yeah, vinyl too.
Man.
Yeah. So that was the whole thing. And I remember we did a show at Skateaway with WILK. They said, we want to bring you over to Skateaway for an appearance. And I'm like, who wants to see us just walk in a skating rink? And we get there, and they go, you have to come in the back door. And I said, I kind of sarcastically said, why is the front door locked? and so we come in the back door, and there's like 1,000 kids in there just screaming. And our bass player, Jeff Ball, literally got his shirt ripped off. It was like, and I'm like, how is this happening? And it was really exciting. I mean, it was unlike anything we ever expected.
I mean, Jimmy, I was at the Bon Jovi show. It seemed like everybody was, and that was kind of a big, sort of arrival moment for Cinch.
It certainly was.
I mean, a lot of people point to that as I remember that show and Cinch opening up, and the song was a hit at the time. So you're an opening act in your home region, playing your own hit song on the radio for a national act. That had to be incredibly exciting.
It was, until I saw John Bon Jovi come running out with his big sunglasses and his military officer's hat and his big long purple cape, and he was just strutting across the stage with the microphone. And I went back to the guys. I go, we got a lot of work to do to catch this guy.
Let's play one from that record that Jimmy mentioned earlier. This is from Can't Fight the Midnight. This one's called For All the Wrong Reasons. Jimmy Harnen here on Music on the Menu on the River with a song called For All the Wrong Reasons. Jimmy calling from Nashville tonight is our guest on the program. We talked before we played the song about a little bit of the history of the song Where Are You Now and how it became a regional hit back in the summer of 1985. About 10, 11 years later, Jimmy moved to Nashville, as we said earlier, trying to, maybe take another shot at the music industry. And it was an interesting journey for Jimmy down there. He spent some time working at Gavin Magazine, and then he was with DreamWorks for a while, and then he was at Capitol Nashville working with people like Keith Urban and Luke Bryan and breaking artists. Then he went over to Big Machine, Republic, and he helped sign bands like the Florida Georgia Line. And now we just got news last week that Jimmy was promoted to the president and CEO of the BMLG Record. Jimmy, I came across an old Music on the Menu recently. I'm going to read something to you. And I just want to read something that you said in a Music on the Menu column back in 1995. So this was 10 years after Where Are You Now was a hit regionally.
All right.
I was sitting in your kitchen table, if you recall.
I do.
In Plymouth. Various trade magazines such as Billboard, Radio and Records, Friday Morning Quarterback, and Music Business International are scattered across the kitchen table. And he's read plenty of books on the record industry, including a collection specifically dealing with the Billboard charts. He can rattle off the names of the presidents and vice presidents of all the major record labels and tell you where they worked prior to their current positions. An admitted chart buff, the action on the Billboard charts seems to interest him more than MLB standings. The record business, says Harnen, is now his passion, and a job at a record company where he can share his expertise and knowledge is now the ultimate goal. I was signed in '89, says Harnen, and I went into Sony Records and I saw the promotion staff and how they got ads and how my song got onto radio stations. From that moment on, I was more interested in getting my song on the radio station than I was playing for that station. I found it more exciting, the intricacies of a record company and how to get those program directors to turn the corner and play our song. I'm constantly reading the trades on what's going on. I've read all the books on the music business and I'm infatuated with it. That's totally where I want to be. So you told me that in 1995, and now here we are 24 years later, and you are one of the most influential people in Nashville. You are the president of a very large label. How does it feel to have those words read back to you?
Well, I mean, it's almost surreal. I get choked up a lot when I do interviews with folks in my hometown because my hometown of Plymouth and Wilkes-Barre, Scranton was always so kind to me and welcoming me, and maybe had I been born and raised somewhere else, I wouldn't have had that kind of support. You at the Times leader, Joe Butkwitz at the Times leader, Jerry Kishbaugh at the Citizen's Voice, all the radio stations, KRZ, Q102, ILK, Rock 107 at the time, even Magic 93, that was an AC station, so they played my record a little later, but everybody was so supportive. So the hometown was amazing, and I may not have had the confidence to go forward if I didn't have the upbringing. I'm going to get choked up here. That hometown taught me. So it's...
and I know that, you lost your mom a few years ago. Condolences on that. Very sorry.
Thank you.
I know
but, yeah, she used to take me to Wilkes-Barre when I was a kid, and it was the first pickup in Plymouth, and I'd be the first person on the bus with her, and the bus was kind of empty, so it was very reverberating. So one day I just started singing the Ballad of the Green Berets, and she let me sing, and then more people were getting on the buses. We went to Breslau and Hanover, and she didn't stop me from singing. And I mean, if my kids did that, I'd be like, oh, quiet, there's people on the bus. And she encouraged that from the ground up. And had she not done that, maybe I would have, the whole path could have been changed just by being on a different, having a different mom or dad that would have maybe stopped me from singing. She encouraged me, and people would walk up and say, you need to take him to get singing lessons. So we went to Tony Grant's Stars of Tomorrow, and I started singing all around town. But that was a pivotal moment that I think would have changed everything had she not been so supportive.
And now here we are, and that obviously has sustained you through every step of your life. And when we were following your progress here in northeastern Pennsylvania, because we have mutual friends, and
Sure.
Mitch and Jeff Walker and folks like that. Oh, here Jimmy's doing this now. And I would tell people, well, Jimmy told me he was going to do that a long time ago. Jimmy's always known that's what he wanted to do. I mean, at least, a good 20, 25 years ago. That was, you kind of made that shift mentally, that was the side of the business that interests you the most.
Well, it was tough to make that call because I was 33 and I thought that was old for an artist, and which is now I know is ridiculous. I signed Brett Young, who's had 5 singles and 5 number ones when he was 34, and people told him he was too old. And he came in to sing for me, and here comes this 6'6" Adonis, former baseball player that had Tommy John surgery, and his career changed. He wanted to be a baseball player, and he came in and sang for me, and I was like, holy cow. But a lot of people said he was too old. And they also said his voice was a little odd, and his voice is what makes him do what he does. I mean, he's batting 1,000 right now, 5 singles, 5 number ones. But I just knew it was time to change, and my wife said to me, that you could, I think Kenny Rogers had a line, he said, there's 2 kinds of people, those who get it done and those who bitch about it. And my wife said, pick a city and let's go. And coincidentally, Mike Betts, who was a DJ at KRZ at the time, send one of your songs to Mason Dixon at Q105 in Tampa. So I did. And the next, it was a song called The Best I Could Do. And he started playing it, and the next day he called me. He had 65 people digitally edited together on my voicemail. And he said, there's a guy you need to meet in Nashville. His name is Cliff Downs. So I came down, and Cliff is still a friend of mine. Mike Betts is still a dear friend of mine, and a very successful entrepreneur. And we came down here, and we moved down here, and I just loved it. And we recorded the song. It started to make some noise, and a couple of record deals were offered to me. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I need to get on the other side. And then I tried to interview for some jobs, and everybody, when I interviewed for a job, thought I was just trying to get a record deal by going in the side door. And so that was really tough. And then when I moved to Nashville, they always say be nice to people all along the way, because when I got here, my babysitter in Nashville was my babysitter, I say that, kind of jokingly, was Lou Galliani, and he was a hugely successful executive at Elektra Records, and he worked for my management company at the time as a consultant. And, I was moving out to L.A. from Wilkes-Barre in 89, and I didn't know anything. I've never been in Los Angeles. So he took care of me. And when I moved to Nashville, he sells the advertising for Gavin. So when I heard there was a job, he said, you're the guy. And getting that job, I sold advertising to the VPs of promotion. And one of the guys that wouldn't advertise in Gavin because he didn't feel it was valuable was Scott Porchetta. So I came up with some plans to get him. He put some advertising in. And then a couple of months later, he offered me a job.
He must have liked the way you pushed him.
Well, I did a lot of things. I gave them buy one, get one free. I gave them all kind of rates. I mean, I realized at that point that the Gavin job was so critical because if I wanted to be a salesman, I had to learn how to sell. Mm-hmm. And so he hired me, and then the next day he got fired. And so I was like, and then so Curb Universal had a spot that was open, and my friend Bart Allman at the time here in Nashville recommended me for it. I took that job, went to Dallas, did really well down there with Winona Judd and Seminole and a few other bands, Cactus Choir, and then Scott landed at DreamWorks. And he said, I'd like to hire you. And my contract was still in place, but he said, whatever it is, I'll get you out of it. And he said, pick the region you want to live in. So I wanted to come back to the Northeast, and I lived in Washington, but I was able to see my mom. My dad had already passed, but I was able to see my mom and all my friends and work with the Wilkes-Barre station, Froggy 101. And then he moved me to Nashville, made me a co-national, and there was nowhere else to go after that. So Capitol, I was on a plane ride with Jody Messina from Washington to Nashville, and she was asking me some questions. I told her some answers, and then she hired me for a year. And then after that, Capitol Records came and offered me the national job, then gave me the VP job, then the senior VP job. And like you said, we broke Eric Church, Luke Bryan, Darius Rucker, Dierks Bentley. We promoted Keith Urban, Trace Atkins, and Lady Antebellum, who's now back on the label with me. We signed him over here on my imprint.
You make it sound like it was so easy, Jimmy, but this was a long journey. I mean, this was going a lot of steps to that process. What did you enjoy the most about it? What did you enjoy most about that whole ride? The people? Doing for artists what I wish somebody had done, more people had done for me in the business. The record business was very different in the 80s and the early 90s, and it moved quickly, and Tom Greco was really great to me. He was a savior in many ways. He supported me as a manager and as a backer. Michaeline Coffey and her family were very supportive of us, and there was a lot of good people. But I think the biggest thrill I get is doing for artists what I wish maybe more people in the record industry did for me back then. There was a lot of great people, but it was a fast-moving pace, and it could eat you up and spit you out if you're not careful. And so I try to make sure I treat people the way I wanted to be treated as an artist, and I think that's proven very beneficial for me. Let's play another one from Jimmy Harnen. This one's called No Reason in the World, written by Diane Warren. I mean, she's written songs from everybody from Celine Dion to Eric Clapton, Mariah Carey, Bon Jovi, Chicago, LeAnn Rimes, Alice Cooper, and of course, a big #1 hit, You Don't Want to Miss a Thing, for Aerosmith. And I guess if you sign on a major label, so write a song for you too. Jimmy Harnen with a song called No Reason in the World.
No reason in the world that I should be here crying. No reason in the world. Wasn't I the one who said I would rather be alone? And wasn't I the one who said I didn't need you? Remember, baby, when I said I was glad to see you go? You said I don't want to see you, so why am I walking the streets at night, calling out your name? If I don't feel anything for you, baby, why am I feeling so much pain? Better being without you. I've got lots of things to do, lots of places I can go, but I just think about you and telling myself there's no reason that I should feel the way I do. It's been a while since we've been over, but why am I still not over you? No reason in the world that I should be
Jimmy Harnen here on Music on the Menu on the River with a song called No Reason in the World. Jimmy, calling in from Nashville, our guest on the program tonight, recently promoted to the president and CEO of BMLG record label. Jimmy, you know, the industry has changed. Our show here on Sunday nights is almost 99% independent artists, people that are recording music on their own, releasing it on their own.
Yep.
The way that the music business has worked over the years, from my understanding anyway, and you would know a lot more about the business side of it than I do. In the 70s, you sort of got noticed by demos, and even in the 80s. In the 90s, independent records became the way to go. Record a good record on your own, sell some units, get some attention. You kind of did that, obviously, in the 80s with a single. That was more, I think, more rare in the 80s than it became in the 90s. But in the 90s, it looked like the blueprint was going to be sell 10, 15,000 records. That'll get our attention. Now we're in this digital age where that's gone. And so, you know, bands are, you know, releasing songs digitally. They're finding an audience sometimes on social media, on YouTube. It's a totally different industry than it was even 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. How do you find artists today? How does a label? You mentioned before an artist coming in and singing for you. How does he get there?
Well, in the 90s, what caused it to happen was Billboard released a thing. Nielsen released a digital monitoring service called BDS, and it was and SoundScan. So SoundScan was able to, with a UPC barcode, and that was the beginning of country. In the old days, you know, there were people calling record stores, and they'd say, "Yeah, I know that Michael Bolton record is not doing well, but just report it as a number one." And in that market, Garth Brooks was probably selling number one. But you could manipulate data before there was any monitoring systems. As soon as SoundScan came in, that's when you saw the country explosion, because there was no way to manipulate the data. And then what happened, you know, in the 90s was the CD manufacturing and the digital recording got so easy, and home studios became more prevalent. So it was easier to make records cost effectively, and you could make CDs at a cheaper rate. And then you incorporate SoundScan and BDS, so people got them in stores. They sold them. It's, you know, again, with SoundScan, they had a UPC barcode. They sold them in shows, and they could track it. So everybody started to look for that. Now in the digital world, we call it the DSPs, or Spotify, Pandora, Amazon. I don't want to leave anybody out. There's a lot of them. You can you look at streaming. I just signed an artist by the name of Riley Green, and he was blowing up in the Southeast. And his audience doesn't. I mean, we're going to put his album out, and it's not even going to be on a CD. It's just going to be a digital album. And he, you know, I was looking around on Spotify. One of my assistants at the time, Andrew Thone, said, "You got to check this guy Riley Green out." And I heard a song called "Running with an Angel," and I said, "Oh my gosh, this guy's awesome!" So I went to his show, and in Birmingham, and he sold it out 2 nights in a row, 1,300 people with $20 a ticket. And we found him on Spotify.
Wow.
And so now that's what it is. Now the streaming world is also, you got to be cautious, because different artists succeed at different platforms. Some artists succeed better at Amazon or Pandora or Spotify or Apple Music than they do. You know, you have to look all over the place. And it's also easy to kind of skew the data, because and not manipulate, but skew it, because if you have 100,000 fans and they keep listening to the song over and over again, you're going to get millions and millions of streams, but the audience isn't getting any bigger.
And then so is your A&R staff today, that's what they're looking at?
Yeah, we look at everything. We still we look at BDS and Mediabase, which are the airplay things. We still look at SoundScan. We still look at iTunes. We look at, you know, all the digital service providers. We look at SiriusXM, the highway. We look at some of the other alternate channels on SiriusXM, because some people might come through a folk outlet. Some people might come through a rock outlet. So that's how we found Florida Georgia Line. SiriusXM was the first to play them.
Okay.
And you know, it was different, because when we had a band called Fast Ride that was kind of doing in a very small way what FGL was doing, and we couldn't get it on the radio. So when FGL came on board, we were, you know, Scott and I were a little bit apprehensive, not because we didn't like them, we loved them. We thought, oh gosh, we just got killed on a sound like this. Will this one work? And Monty Lipman, who was our partner at the time at Republic in New York, he used to call me the professor because, as you know, I'm pretty big on data.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he goes, Jimmy, sometimes you have to listen with your eyes. And I went, ugh. And I remember waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, am I going to be the guy who passed on Hootie and the Blowfish? Mm-hmm. And I woke up that morning. I called Scott. I said, Scott has a private jet. And I said, can I take the jet to Evansville to see them? He goes, absolutely. And then we realized we could drive there faster. So we drove there. And I remember we got up there, and it was 124 degrees on the field, which was AstroTurf. And FGL was doing it all on their own. They would drive a van with their gear behind them. They would load the stage, play, shower, and then cook barbecue for the people. And people were going nuts. And wow. I'll never forget, I was under a tent with about 4 other record companies.
Oh, I've heard this story. This is a great story.
And I'm standing there, and I'm going, these guys are just standing here like, in the back. I'm like, so I turn my hat around and go up in the front row. And at the number 1 party for Cruise, Seth England, one of their managers, said one of the reasons we signed with, at that time, Republic Nashville was because he was the only label guy that didn't stand there at the tent. He went in the front row with the people. And
they like that about you.
That was very nice of them to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had told me, I think it was probably about 10 years ago, we were talking on the phone once, you were already at a label in Nashville, and I was having a similar conversation, and you said that for an artist to sign with a label, I'll never forget you telling me this, it's just as important for the band to feel good about the label, and you got to make sure they love you.
Absolutely.
They absolutely love you. You want to sign with a label that 100% believes in you and cannot wait to help break you. And if you're not feeling that, if you're not getting that impression, don't even go there. And you told me that about 10 years ago. I assume that still applies?
It is, and I always say, there's an old saying that says you hire slow and you fire fast. So I like to get to know people, and we got to know Brian's mother and father. Tyler's dad passed away before he was signed. He was in a very bad helicopter crash, and we got to know them. We spent time with them, and they were just great people. To this day, they were all best friends. But we wanted to get to know people, and I still do that. Like when I signed Brett Young, I brought him to my house 3 times. We jumped in my pool. We probably had a little too much to drink. We broke a glass in the pool, but we got to know him. We smoked cigars, and then Dan Huff, who's one of my best buddies and produces a lot of our records, I said, Dan, come over here. Then I called a couple of radio guys. I said, do me a favor, shoot holes in this guy. I'm going to have him play for you. Tell me why I shouldn't sign him. And we got done, and they said, I can't poke holes in it. He's amazing. Wow. So it's a long process, but I always say if you get to know each other and you both love and respect each other in a business way, no matter how tough the times get, you always have that as your floor, and it's never going to get worse than that. And if you don't establish it's like building a building without a strong foundation. So I think the foundation is critical, and you always have to remember, in this business, we're juggling glass hearts. And you can't let them hit the ground because they crash, and it's never nice to break somebody's heart.
Great stuff from Jimmy Harnen. We're going to take a quick break now. We'll be back with more conversation and some more music from Jimmy after the break, so stick around.
The Woodlands is celebrating 50 years. Do you believe it? 50 years. For 2 generations of the Kornfeld family, there's a pretty good chance that you or someone you know slept in one of their beds. Over those 50 years, most of you came out and partied with them on the deck for 5 Day, or inside the 25th Hour, or Evolution nightclubs. For 5 decades, how many of you have dined in their legendary Left Bank Bistro or Time Restaurant? And in half of a century, thousands of you celebrated your first dance in the Grand Ballroom. For 50 years, the Woodlands has been reinventing itself, and they're not done yet. Now, they're proud to introduce the area's newest outdoor wedding venue, the Bridal Gardens, and the creation of their Streamside Apartments. The Woodlands wants to thank all of you who got them there and invite you to swing by for sushi, grab some pizza, listen to some live music, or just stop in for a cocktail. They're not slowing down. They promise. They're just getting started. Check them out at thewoodlandsresort.com.
All right, we're back here on Music on the Menu on the River. Our special guest on the program tonight is Jimmy Harnen, Northeastern Pennsylvania native and the president and CEO of BMLG Records, and of course, put a song all the way in the national top 10 30 years ago. Jimmy, you gave us some great insight into how you go about finding bands on a major label these days in this new era of music. But I imagine once you find them, like you said, you're still looking for that something. You're still looking for something that makes that decision that you're going to make that commitment to work with that artist to take them to another level. For you personally, what is that something? What do you look for? Besides the song?
Clive Davis said, I sign the artist that I can't put my arms around, meaning I can't quite figure out why I like it. And it's funny because I was just talking with Scott about this today, and I said, it's that in the NFL they have a great line at the NFL Combine. It says you can't teach speed. You can't teach someone how to run faster. They can only run as fast as they can run. And the thing I've learned through the years is you can't rescue people either. And I think when I first started out, I would sign people thinking, well, I could help them. And I realized you can't. It's got to come from the inside out, not the outside in. It's just like you don't chase press. If you're really good, press chases you. And so I sit back and I look at someone, like when I saw Brett Young, I said to him, I know what Clive Davis felt like when he signed Whitney Houston. And he kind of laughed. He goes, are you kidding me? I said, no, I'm not saying you sing as, with the range that Whitney Houston has, but whatever you got, I can't manufacture. I can't build it. It's a gift from God. And so I look for those things. And while I still look at DSPs and SoundScan and everything, there are so many people that, are just so talented that may not have the ability to do that stuff. They may not have a manager, but they're incredibly talented. They have that special something. And they may not just have good business acumen, but I don't care about their business as much as I care about their talent. And so I look for that thing that I go, what is that? When I saw Brian and Tyler perform, I was like, they played at the BMI stage many years ago, and I just looked at them and I go, I can't explain this, but it's friggin' great. And I've learned not to fight that feeling. And sometimes you start second guessing, and I think once you start second guessing, that's when you're wrong. I always say you follow your heart and the money will follow.
Who are some of your most proud signings? Who are the ones that maybe you were the one? Because even though you're one of the top executives at the label, I'm sure you have to discuss it with a team of people and so forth, and maybe you're the one that pushes for it, or maybe at this point in your career you are the bottom line. I assume you are the last say. I assume you would be at this point in your career.
Scott and I have a little rule. It's like if he likes it and I like it, we've never missed. Now, we have made it on ones he has and I didn't like, and vice versa. Okay. But usually if he and I go, and he's always been very kind that if he doesn't get it, he'll go, okay, just do your due diligence, do your process, and prove me wrong. And when I have, he would do that. So, the proudest signings, I remember the first day, it was my first day on the job, and the band Perry came in, and they played If I Die Young. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, and a funny story, we put that song out second because when I took it around to radio, they thought it was about suicide.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, so we put out another song called Hip to My Heart. That went to 15, and it stiffed at 15, which is still a big chart move. But then we put If I Die Young out. People were afraid of it. We lost a bullet twice, and a bullet means significant growth over the prior week on the chart. So when you lose your bullet, you're in trouble. So we lost it twice before it got to 30. And we did a real interesting thing. We made it the single of the week at iTunes back when they were doing that. We gave away 478,000 digital downloads and still sold 8 million downloads.
Oh, wow.
So right now, in the world of digital sales, the number one selling song in the history of country music in digital sales is Cruise, which is ours. Number 2 is Taylor Swift with Love Story. Number 3 is Lady Antebellum, Need You Now, they're with us. And number 4 is the band Perry with If I Die Young. So the band Perry was definitely one of my proudest moments, and Neil, Kimberly, and Reed were, they're no longer with us. They're out doing their own thing now, but that was a proud moment, and Scott and I were thrilled that they came on board. Obviously, Florida Georgia Line changed my life in every way, and I'm forever grateful to them. And interesting enough, they have the longest-running song at 51 weeks with Meant to Be with BB Rexa on the Billboard chart. And prior to that, it was Sam Hunt, and prior to that, it was Cruise. So they've got the top 2 longest-running songs on the Billboard Hot Country chart.
It's funny, Jimmy. It's funny. I love hearing you talk like this because you used to talk like this about other artists. You could talk this way about the history of a Beatles song or something, and now they're your artists. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool, and it's something I thank the Lord every night before I go to sleep for. But, Brett Young, the same thing. Riley Green, the same thing. We had a chance to work with the incredible talent Martina McBride, and she was just, we joke, Jerry House, a radio show guy, he said she's 2 lungs and a trachea, because she's about 98 pounds soaking wet. And she's got a voice that could just blow the roof off the house. And working with her, her and her husband, John McBride, were just 2 amazing people. And I think anything we sign has been our most proudest, to be honest, because we don't throw darts against the wall. We go after the things we love. And I always bring our team in. I bring in from the regionals to my executive assistant to the VPs of promotion to A&R and Scott, and it's a whole family. And that's one of the great things about the whole label group is we operate as a family and we lead with our hearts.
Let's play another one here from Jimmy Harnen. This one's called Hello. Jimmy Harnen here on Music on the Menu on the River from 1989's Can't Fight the Midnight. Jimmy is our guest for the whole hour here on the show, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit more after the break, so stick around.
The Woodlands is celebrating 50 years. Do you believe it? 50 years. For 2 generations of the Kornfeld family, there's a pretty good chance that you or someone you know slept in one of their beds. Over those 50 years, most of you came out and partied with them on the deck for 5 Day, or inside the 25th Hour, or Evolution nightclubs. For 5 decades, how many of you have dined in their legendary Left Bank Bistro or Time Restaurant? And in half of a century, thousands of you celebrated your first dance in the Grand Ballroom. For 50 years, the Woodlands has been reinventing itself, and they're not done yet. Now, they're proud to introduce the area's newest outdoor wedding venue, the Bridal Gardens, and the creation of their Streamside Apartments. The Woodlands wants to thank all of you who got them there and invite you to swing by for sushi, grab some pizza, listen to some live music, or just stop in for a cocktail. They're not slowing down. They promise. They're just getting started. Check them out at thewoodlandsresort.com.
All right, we're back here on Music on the Menu on the River with our special guest, Jimmy Harnen, calling in from Nashville. Now, Jimmy, we just, listened to a couple of songs here tonight on the show from Can't Fight the Midnight from '89, which was released nationally through CBS Records. Stylistically, and I know you had talked to me about this in, I think, that same interview in '95 that we did, where you were kind of looking back on that time of your life. Stylistically, the songs are different. You have there's a gritty rock approach to some of the songs, and then obviously the ballad has a smooth, polished Jimmy Harnen voice on it. And I remember you telling me back then that you thought that may have been a problem with the record, and now as a label, that's something that you could help artists walk them through. So talk about that a little bit. How do you feel about that record, listening to it now 30 years later?
Well, I think the thing is, when Where You Now first came out, it was in 1985, and music was very different back then. And so I was also not as accomplished as a singer. It took 13 hours for me to sing that the vocal at the record plant, because there was no pitch correction, there was no Pro Tools. You had to sing it. Mm-hmm. And so when they re-released it, they didn't want to change it because they thought that people would say, well, you changed it a little bit. I do know that Sheriff and Benny Mardones, they did re-record theirs over. So I had to live with that vocal all alone tonight for the rest of my life. But in '89, you had Bon Jovi, that was the metal scene. So I came in and I guess I felt like I tried to overachieve, and I said, well, maybe I should sing a little more balls. And so I was like, hey, yeah, and doing all that kind of stuff. And Jerry Greenberg he signed Led Zeppelin and Foreigner, so he was totally into it. But in hindsight, what we should have done was we should have extended the line. And there's an old saying that like BMW never changes their body style for more than 15% because people always want to be able to identify that it's a BMW. So I think line extension is really important with an artist. I think you keep changing, you move forward, but you don't change the brand too much so you don't leave anybody behind. And I think that was a problem. I think the vocal was too much, especially following up Where You Now.
So almost like going back to that same time period, you feel like maybe you should have fallen a little bit more stylistically with your friend Richard Marx?
Absolutely, and it's funny. I was just with him the other day here in Nashville, he and Daisy. But he had Burn. But I think I moved the target from songwriting too far off what I did, and I definitely took the vocal too far. But hey, you live and learn. I treasure that learning experience now, but not so much back then.
And now that's knowledge, though, that you can share with young artists.
Absolutely, and it's always tough because the main thing you want to make sure artists can grow and prosper and blossom, and so it's always a pull and tug. But we try our best to make sure we keep on point and still allow them that creative freedom that they need.
Jimmy, when the song hit the national top 10, and we've had success here, the boys who you worked with, Jerry and Bill, obviously on producing Where Are You Now, they were prior to you. After your success, we had, the Badleys and Breaking Benjamin. And so, we've had some artists from this area that have had success. And if you look at that lineage, they're all different too. What makes you unique in that group is that your song is the highest charting song to ever come from an artist from Northeastern Pennsylvania. It was a top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, but it happened 4 years after the regional hit.
Yep.
And there was no album out at the time.
No.
That's an amazing story. That doesn't happen very often. Share with our listeners how that happened. How did you have a song become a top 10 hit on the national Billboard chart 4 years after it was basically a hit in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania?
I was working at Tom Greco's office, and I got a phone call from Joe Nardone, who owns the Gallery of Sound, and he said, I just came back from an expo in Las Vegas, and they're playing your song every 3.5 hours on a radio station. I don't know which one it was. So I knew every 3.5 hours was heavy rotation, which means it had the best research, and it was definitely selling. So I went to the album Rock, the Yellow Pages album of Rock. I looked up all the Phoenix radio stations, and I finally got in touch with KZZP in Phoenix, which was programmed by Guy Zapolian and Jay Taylor. And I got through to them, and they said, "Man, your song is blowing up. Tomorrow on the cover of the entertainment section of USA Today, we're going to be talking about you, Benny Mardones, Sheriff, and UB40." And it takes off. So I quickly go to the same people who broke it the first time down in Cherry Hill. And they literally, this is how I got my deal. Ron and Fred called up Walter Yetnikoff, who ran Sony at the time, and he literally goes, "Remember that guy we had in Wilkes-Barre, Jimmy Harnen? Well, the song's blowing up, and listen, okay. Hey, Jimmy, you signed to WTG Records. It's a new label. It stands for Walter, Jerry, and Tommy, and you're going to go to L.A. and make a record to catch up to the single." And that's how fast it happened.
Oh, my goodness. Were you ready for it?
No. No. I remember I woke up in Los Angeles the first morning because we flew in at night, and I'd never been there. And I woke up and I looked out the balcony. We were staying in Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. And I looked out the window and I'm like, I could live here. I mean, there was palm trees. It was sunny and 72 every day. And you know what a fan I was of the record business. They were all right across the street from me. So I was like, it was like going to the Baseball Hall of Fame if you're a baseball fan.
Now you're in Nashville, not Los Angeles, but some people would probably say that, at least musically, a lot of Los Angeles has come to Nashville.
Yeah, very much so. There's a lot of people here all the time. And, Brett Young has a great line at the end of his video for his new song, Catch. It says, I think it's a Yiddish proverb, make plans, God laughs.
I like that. Yeah, how do you make God laugh? Tell him about your plans, right?
Tell him about your plans, yeah. If you would have told me Nashville, and of course, as soon as I got here and had a little bit of success, my mother goes, "See, I told you, it's that rock and roll stuff is not good. The country stuff, that's the stuff."
Mom knows best, right?
Absolutely.
Jimmy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Everybody here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, and seriously, I put something up on my Facebook page, on the Music on the Menu page from the Billboard, when it was announced that you got, the promotion. And so many people were liking and sharing it and posting nice comments. This community is very proud of you.
Well, I'm very proud of the community.
Well, it certainly goes both ways. And, we wish you all the best. And we thank you for calling in tonight and talking to us a little bit about your amazing journey from an artist here in Northeastern Pennsylvania all the way up to really the top of the record business. I can't think of a better song to close with than that song we've been talking about a little bit here tonight. Where Are You Now? And where is he now? He's in Nashville, Tennessee, running a record label, and he's doing just fine.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, DC. And thanks, everybody in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. You guys are the best.
Thanks, Jimmy.